All right. Well, today's session is on practicing self-talk and error recovery routines. And the focus of the session is really to provide language and offer techniques to help coaches develop your athletes in the mind pillar in USA Volleyball's development model. The mind pillar means training our minds to maximize performance. And the mind pillar is one of 5 foundational pillars in USA Volleyball's development model. I want to start today with a quote by Dr. Pauline Hacker. Dr. Hacker was the U.S. national team mental skills coach for the USA women's soccer team when they won the 1999 World Cup, also known as the 99ers. And she's got extensive experience working with USA soccer, USA hockey, 6-time Olympic member of the coaching staff. And in her book, Achieving Excellence, Mastering Mindset for Peak Performance in Life and Sport, she identifies 2 key mental skills that she identifies as the most important aspects of mental training development that are constantly being used to help develop other mental skills. And those are self-awareness and self-regulation. So in this quote, it's a performer's commitment to become self-aware and developing their ability to self-regulate that will determine how they implement these mental skills into their daily life. And I wanted to start here with this concept of self-awareness, developing self-awareness, and also self-regulation, because that is so key to becoming aware and having control over self-talk. So these 2 skills, self-awareness and self-regulation, I want to define them. First, self-awareness. Self-awareness is to know oneself and one's needs in any given moment. So before, during, and after both practice and competition or any team time or personal time, we need that self-awareness to be able to control self-talk and understand it. And then the second one is self-regulation. So self-regulation really refers to the ability to control one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And I like to think of this as a cycle, where in the cycle, in order for an athlete to self-regulate, they need to have self-awareness of their behavior, of their self-talk, of their inner dialogue, which eventually, that's self-awareness that eventually leads back to self-regulation as they start to control their mind and their body language and their behavior on and off the court. So as a sports psych or a mental performance consultant or a coach, we're constantly in this cycle with the athletes, developing the self-awareness and then the self-regulation, self-awareness to self-regulation. And whether it is self-awareness around what they're saying in their head, self-awareness around their body language and how their teammates and their coaches and their opponents are interpreting them and receiving them, or whether they're just like rolling their eyes and having a reaction that maybe they're not even aware of, or whether it's also physical self-awareness, right? Maybe dropping their hands when they're jump setting or dropping their elbow on their arm swing, things like that. So the self-awareness, self-regulation, I like to think of it as this lens, this cycle, which is the lens through which I teach self-talk, the mental skill of self-talk to athletes. So let's dive in. What is self-talk? Self-talk is the internal dialogue that athletes have with themselves and their mind that impacts athletes' emotions, behavior, actions, and motivation. So I like to think of self-talk as the key to cognitive self-control. This self-talk dialogue, it can take place in an athlete's head, such as it can take place in the athlete's head, or it can even take place out loud. So if the athlete is maybe mumbling to themselves or beating themselves up verbally, you might hear some curse words here. It's all self-talk. That's all within the realm of self-talk. They're talking to themselves. They're not talking to others, or whether they even realize that they're saying it out loud or not. And then also the other type of self-talk is just in their head. So, and that's, as a coach, this is something that you want to be aware of. You're looking at your players, trying to understand, trying to get in their heads, what's going on in their heads, what their self-talk is actually saying. Is it internal? Is it external? Right? We really only have access to the external stuff. We have to dig a little more to find out the internal. Self-talk can be used to improve concentration. It can be helpful to assist breaking bad habits, increase motivation, and ultimately increase effort. But there are different types of self-talk. So let's get into that next. So when I teach self-talk to athletes or cover the topic of self-talk, I really like to break it down into 3 categories. There's more subcategories, but I think for the purpose of teaching, especially to youth players, these 3 main categories are really important to understand. And the first one is positive or motivational self-talk. The second one is instructional self-talk. And the third one is negative self-talk. So I think oftentimes when we think of self-talk, it gets forced into this binary understanding of either like negative or positive self-talk. And it's actually much more complex than that. So I want to dive into each one of these types of self-talk. But to start, I want to make sure that we're developing an awareness with our athletes of the different types of self-talk in competition or in practice, because oftentimes athletes are just not even aware that their self-talk is falling into a certain category. There's no awareness and there's no self-regulation. So what is positive self-talk or motivational self-talk? Positive or motivational self-talk it's going to be general, non-specific. It's going to have a tone of optimism, so it's going to be hopeful. It's usually short and concise, just like quick words. It's focused on the present, so focus right on the here and now on this play. I'm usually reacting either to what just happened or it's about to happen. They're really focused on that in between, right here on the present. It's going to be maybe personally meaningful, not for everyone, but it can be. Hopefully, it is. It's going to be more powerful if it is personally meaningful. And positive and motivational self-talk is effective for increasing effort, for psyching up, and increasing motivation. So some examples of positive or motivational self-talk, pretty simple stuff. Some examples might be, I'm doing the best I can. I've got the next one. I'm getting better, right? It's just a general, short, concise, positive reaction to the play that just happened and preparing it for the next play. So next, I want to shift into instructional self-talk. Instructional self-talk is going to be really specific and strategic, so it's more task-oriented. It's going to be focused on elements that are within the player's control. So their specific position on the court, their specific responsibility on the court. Oftentimes it incorporates mental cues, and it's helpful for learning a new skill or correcting an error or redirecting attention. So whenever I'm teaching self-talk to athletes, and especially young athletes, and they're trying to identify what examples of instructional self-talk would be, I usually ask them to think about the most common phrases or things that their coach yells at them or tells them, right? Those are the things that are really good examples of instructional self-talk. So it's really specific for volleyball. We might be, as a setter, we might be thinking just something like high hands, right? Where it's a visual image and it's instructional, very, very specific for the position. Or as a hitter, it might be reach and snap your wrist, or keep your eye on the ball on defense, whatever it is. These are just some examples. You coaches can come up with 1,000 different examples. But you'll notice that this is really different. This is very different than just, hey, you'll get the next one. You got this, which is sort of like generic and positive. This is really much more specific. So instructional self-talk. Instructional self-talk is really most effective when athletes is especially effective when athletes are really in that learning phase. So they're learning new skills, they're learning new techniques, maybe changing their technique. Instructional self-talk is going to be really helpful at this stage. It's helpful at all stages, but especially at a young stage, instead of just like, hey, good job, you got this. No, the sort of my bad response. It's more like, let's be really specific and instructional and use that break in between points to correct the error or mentally picture or image the change that you want your athlete to make for the next play. And when we're talking about instructional self-talk or motivational and positive self-talk, I do just want to name it is important to keep these these phrases really short and specific. We have very little time in between points as a volleyball player, so we have to keep them really specific and short. It's most effective if they're speaking to themselves in the first person and in the present tense. We obviously want to be constructive and positive or instructional, and make the phrases with intention and attention. So we really like to have instructional self-talk be specific to a position, whereas positive or motivational self-talk it's just going to be much more generic. It doesn't matter what position you play. And it is helpful to repeat these phrases often before, during, and after competition. So we're not just doing it in a game, we're doing it in practice as well. All right. And next is the negative self-talk. And negative self-talk is probably the one that we hear the most about. So it's going to be self-critical and demeaning, destructive. It's counterproductive for both the athlete and the team. It cultivates anxiety. It can cultivate anxiety, doesn't for everyone. It can promote self-doubt, destroy confidence, and deteriorate team cohesion. Examples of self-talk that are negative. How could you miss that ball? You don't belong on this team. You're such a fill in the blank. I'm not going to say it, but you can come up with your own. When we think about negative self-talk, I want to name that negative self-talk is not something we should take lightly with players. When I work with athletes and start to investigate their negative self-talk, I've been honestly really shocked and surprised about this sort of like severity, the toxicity and cruelness that some of the negative self-talk language that comes up from the athletes, and even very young athletes at every level. That is really concerning to me as a mental health professional and as a mental performance consultant. It's also really damaging to the performance. So this goes deeper than just on the court, right? This can get really deep. And so we really want to be taking negative self-talk seriously and addressing it. If there's like really one thing I can really teach that I would want to teach athletes, especially young athletes, is to be able to get control of their negative self-talk and regulate it and stop it. That is going to be one of the most important things that we can teach young athletes, I believe, and that's just my personal opinion. When does negative self-talk usually happen the most? It is in reaction to error, right? It's usually going to be in reaction to error. So I love this quote from Brené Brown. Talk to yourself like you would to someone you loved. And I use this a lot with especially with volleyball teams, because when athletes are asked what their negative self-talk is, either on an individual or team level, and if you were to ask the athlete to consider saying what they say to themselves to one of their teammates and ask them how it would make them feel, oftentimes they would just never do it. Their response would be, I would never say that. That would be hurtful. It would hurt their confidence. It could be really damaging. I'd be worried about how they would feel. It might make them cry. It's a pretty severe response. And so we want to be considering that as an athlete, speak to yourself the way you would speak to the way that you would speak to your teammates. So it's a great quote to use as an example here. So I want to get in now that we've got the three main types of self-talk, negative self-talk, motivational self-talk, and motivational and positive self-talk, and instructional self-talk. We want to get into strategies or interventions on how to stop or control or regulate the negative self-talk that inevitably comes up. during a competition. And the first technique is thought stopping. So with thought stopping is simply the process of overriding negative thoughts in one's mind by using a mental cue or trigger. So an example of that, it might be a verbal reminder to stop, or it might be like a physical reminder to stop. Like snapping your fingers, wiping your sweat off your head. I see a lot of especially girls teams, women's teams, like fixing their hair tie, adjusting their knee pads, wiping the sweat off their shoes, something like that. It can be something like that. It can also be connecting with their teammates, making eye contact, high fives, coming into the circle in between points. And the verbal reminder can also be just something like a cue word. It can be something as specific as just like stop. It can be an image where they're just thinking of something. With thought stopping, we're really just trying to it's like an interruption. All right, we're just interrupting the sort of the flow of negative thoughts and the negative dialogue. Think of it as just like interrupting the conversation. That's what thought stopping is. And then another intervention that we have for negative self-talk is negative thought replacement. So in negative thought replacement, it's actually the process of converting the self-talk from negative to positive or instructional by redirecting the mind to speak encouragement or motivation. So with this, we're actually replacing the negative self-talk with the more positive or motivational self-talk phrase. So an example of this might be, instead of saying, "You're such an idiot, how could you miss that shot?" we might replace it with something like, "Mistakes are part of getting better. I'll get the next one." That might be something that's motivational. Instructional might be one of the examples I used before about fixing an arm swing, really focusing on connecting with your setter or something like that, right? So we really want to help athletes replace their negative self-talk with these types of negative self-talk interventions. And one thing that can be really helpful in the negative self-talk replacement is to combine it with some breath work. And to combine negative self-talk replacement with controlled breathing, athletes can try exhaling the negative self-talk and inhaling that positive affirmation or the instructional cue that they're trying to connect with and start to imagine. So I am going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to run through two different types of controlled breathing techniques that you can use with players. And all of this is building up into an error recovery routine. So first so far we've covered the different types of self-talk. We've covered the two negative self-talk interventions, and now we're going to do two types of controlled breathing techniques, and then we're going to put it all together into an error recovery routine. So box breathing is really helpful and effective breathing technique that can be used to help an athlete self-regulate and recover. And excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Throat's a little dry. All right, so box breathing technique, I'm going to go ahead and I will count you through it. Basically, on box breathing, you're going to inhale for a count of 4. Hold your breath at the top of your inhale for a count of 4. You're going to exhale for a count of 4. And then you're going to hold your breath at the bottom of the exhale for a count of 4. So it's box breathing or 4x4 breathing because all sides are the same length. If 4 breaths is too long for you, if it's starting to feel like you're starting to feel a shorter breath, you're a little lightheaded, just go ahead and shorten the count. We just want to make sure all the breaths are the same length. And vice versa, if I'm going too fast for you and you need to lengthen it, just go ahead and lengthen it. Go at your own pace. That's how I always teach it to athletes. And also before we do this, when you're teaching this, there's tons of information on this. If you just Google box breathing technique videos, there's some really great videos that actually have visuals. You can follow a light, you can follow an arrow, and that can be really helpful for teaching it. When I'm teaching this technique to athletes, I find that in the beginning, it can feel hard for athletes they have to like either count with their fingers or like tap on their leg or something, or on their or with their use their hands to be able to do the counting and the breathing at the same time. But eventually you just start to learn. It starts to become really automated, so you don't have to think about it as much. So we'll just go ahead. We'll do 3 rounds of this now, just so everyone can get a try. And this, I invite you to join along, coaches, and just enjoy this time to just focus on your breath today. So go ahead and get yourself in a comfortable position. I recommend feet flat on the floor, sit with your back straight up, just being aware of your body. You can close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. We're going to go ahead and take an inhale breath for a count of 4. Then go ahead and hold your breath at the top of your inhale for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 4. And then hold your breath at the bottom of your exhale for a count of 4. Again, inhale for a count of 4. Hold at the top of your inhale. Exhale for 4. And hold at the bottom of your exhale. One more round at your own pace. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. And hold for 4. Then open your eyes and just check in with your body, just noticing how you feel. If you feel any different, just being aware of how that breath affects you can be really helpful. Maybe you notice that it kind of got easier on the second or third round to do the counting and focus on the breath work. So that is box breathing or 4x4 breathing. And the second technique I'm going to teach today is ratio breathing. So for ratio breathing, some athletes find this a little easier to learn at first. But ratio breathing is basically your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. So I like to think of it as just kind of up and down. So your inhale for a count of 3, exhale for a count of 6. Just like the box breathing, want to adjust the pacing to suit your needs. So everyone's different. So if my counting is too slow for you and you're starting to feel a little short of breath, go ahead and speed it up. You don't have to follow me. Same thing if it's too fast and you need to slow it down, go ahead and take those longer breaths. It doesn't matter the number. So if you need to inhale for a count of 4 and exhale for a count of 8, that's fine too. We just want to make sure that it's always that your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. So 1-to-2 ratio. So just like the box breathing, I will go ahead and I'll walk you through it now. So we're going to go ahead and same thing, close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, if you can. Just do a body scan first, check in with your body. How are you feeling? Notice if there's tension anywhere in your body. If there's any emotions that are dominant. And then we're going to shift the focus to your breathing, to the breath work. And we'll go ahead and start. Just want you to inhale for a count of 3. And exhale for a count of 6. And then inhale for a count of 3. Exhale for a count of 6. And then again, inhale for a count of 3. And exhale for a count of 6. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes. So that is ratio breathing. And at this point, when I'm teaching breathwork to teams, I usually like to check in with the athletes and find out how do they respond to the box breathing? How do they respond to the ratio breathing? Which one do they like better? Especially with young teams, I don't want them to think they have to memorize every single technique. A goal for a section is usually to get them to just learn one new technique that works for them. And then we can make a plan of how to implement that into an error recovery routine, or pre-competition routine. So hopefully at this point you have identified whether you like the ratio breathing better or the box breathing better. And then the next thing that we would do is we would start to integrate that into that negative self-talk replacement. So if you, going back to either the instructional or the motivational positives slides, remembering those keywords or phrases that you wanted that it connected with, we can integrate that by combining it with the breath. So it would be like inhaling your either inhaling your affirmation or your keyword or some sort of motivational phrase, and exhaling any of that negative self-talk. And eventually we just get to the point where we're just really focused on inhaling that positive self-talk or the instructional phrase, maybe even using some visualization to picture that positive self-talk or the image going throughout your body, and really taking a second to imagine that, and reminding you that this all has to happen very quickly. It takes me a long time to explain, but this all has to happen in between points, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about error recovery routines. So what is an error recovery routine? I've mentioned it a few times now. Well, to be able to tell you, before we get into an error recovery routine, we really have to talk about what is a routine. So a routine in sports, it's really a behavior that is repetitive, it's consistent, but it's also flexible in the face of obstacles. So routines can be broken down to pre-performance, which is before a game, in performance, which is during a game, or post-performance or recovery, which is going to be after the game. And we're going to talk more about deeper into routines. We'll do a whole presentation on performance routines in a different session. But really today, what we're focused on is error recovery routines, and error recovery routines are going to be in performance routines. Okay, these are things that we are going to do. These are strategies, interventions for an athlete to recover from their mistake. So you may have heard error recovery routines referred to as like point resetting. It's really a plan for recovering from mistakes in volleyball and refocusing and mentally preparing for the next play. So what is an error recovery routine? Covered that. When should a player use an error recovery routine? It's really right after the mistake is made. So it's in response to the mistake. Once the ball hits the ground, you have just a couple of seconds, maybe a minute or two, depending on what's going on in the game, to recover and prepare for the next play. That is when a player should implement their point resetting or error recovery routine. And why should we use it? It's to help redirect the player's attention on what matters most in the present moment and to help prepare them for the next play. So again, errors are the most common triggers for negative self-talk during volleyball games. And so we want to be implementing these error recovery routines right after the mistake is made, so that athletes aren't beating themselves up and costing more points than just the one. So I want to just sort of give you a visual of what an error recovery routine example might look like. So like you see on this graphic, at the top you see a mistake. So initially the mistake is made. That's the first step. That's going to be the trigger. That's the activating event, right? So in volleyball, might be like a shanked pass. Any mistake, but for this example, we'll use a shanked pass example. All right, so how does the athlete respond to the shanked pass? Well, we move into step 2, which is going to be self-awareness. How they respond initially, they might not have self-awareness. They might not be aware of reaction. They might just be like a really strong response. They might have the negative self-talk either internally or externally. They might have some physical body language that is not helpful, to say the least, not helpful for the team. So the self-awareness becomes, what is your internal dialogue saying? What is going through your head right now after you just shake that pass? And what is your body language saying to the team? What is it saying to your coaches and the opponents? I find that the self-awareness piece, especially with the body language, is so important, especially for young players. It's like a lot of times there's no awareness of the eye rolls or the shoulder shrugs, or they think that they're just reacting to themselves, and that it maybe doesn't affect their teammates or their coaches. And I often try to teach that this self-awareness piece is really important, because the impact of their actions is affecting their teammates. Their setter might be losing confidence in them. As a hitter, might not, how they respond either verbally or internally or through their body language might determine whether or not the setter feels confident setting them again on the next play. It might determine whether the coach feels like you're going to keep them in or pull them out, sub them out. And it also might determine, it might impact what the opponents are doing. Are they going to serve that? Are they going to serve that player? Are you going to start to target that player? Or are they going to shy away? So kind of explaining that part of it can really help athletes buy into this concept of after making a mistake, to really shifting the focus to self-awareness. Moving into the lower bottom one, step 3, self-regulation strategy. So instructional self-talk or negative thought replacement is going to be 2 primary self-regulation strategies. So we'll start with the first ones. You have that self-awareness, you're moving into self-regulation. So instructional self-talk. The first thing you're going to do, you're going to analyze the error. What did I do wrong? How can I adjust it? How can I fix it for the next play? That might be part of your instructional self-talk strategy. Another one just might be replacing, either stopping or replacing the negative self-talk that starts to come up after you made the mistake, after you shake the pass. Right, and then moving into the last one is the self-regulation, or is really a redirect and focus on the target. And that's where, that is the impact of the self-regulation. Right, that's the goal. That's where we're trying to get to, is helping the athlete then focus on the next play, focus on what they should be focused on in preparation for the next play. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide. And I've shared this quote from Karch before, but I think it's such a good one. Karch often talks about making mistakes in volleyball and how mistakes are such a big part of the game in volleyball. Karch frequently talks about the importance of risk-taking in volleyball, and volleyball being a game in which you lose at least half of the points in any typical match. And therefore, we have to expect to make mistakes. So if I'm never making mistakes, then I'm going to be a slower learner. I'm going to be learning at a slower rate than if I'm making mistakes and operating more where I am comfortable. And I think that is really, really important to share with players, to really adjust. What we're really trying to do is readjust and reframe the way athletes are thinking about making mistakes. And we often hear the phrase, volleyball is a game of mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. If they're not making mistakes, they're not pushing themselves, and maybe they're playing too cautious, maybe playing too careful. So there's always that line on pushing yourself to be better, taking risks, but being smart about it in volleyball. And so really helping athletes change their reframe how they're thinking about mistakes, and how the self-talk, managing the awareness and regulating an athlete's self-talk is going to be a big part of how they respond to mistake making. And I'll have one last slide to share, and then I want to open it up for hopefully some good questions and some dialogue here before we wrap up. So why does self-talk matter? Hopefully I've addressed that already from a performance perspective. It's self-talk. Positive self-talk can also raise self-esteem. Self-talk is a reflection of your internal narrative. It's also ultimately connected, again, with an athlete's self-esteem and self-confidence. It's also ultimately what we're trying to do here with the athletes is to increase their sense of self-compassion and their self-esteem. So self-talk, as I've already covered, self-talk is a predictor of performance. It's definitely going to impact how they show up, how they play on the court, how they show up in the next point, how they connect with their teammates, all those things. It's definitely a performance matter. But I also want to share that it's also a personal matter. This self-talk is connected to their mental health and their mental wellness, their sense of self-compassion, and those things are really, really powerful, especially when we're teaching young athletes or collegiate athletes and helping them not get burnt out, helping them learn life skills that transfer off the volleyball court and team skills. Self-talk is really going to be important. So I like this quote at the end here: self-talk affects athletes' self-concept, their self-confidence, emotions, and behavior. I like to think of it as like the whole athlete, the whole person, the whole self. It's not just about performance, although it definitely impacts performance. It also is about the whole person. So before we answer any questions, this is my contact information. I do have a free workbook that has some worksheets that you can use on all mental skills and also specifically self-talk. I will share one of the worksheets from my workbook with Lauren to get to you all, so you have a worksheet that you can actually work with and do with the players. The way that I like to integrate the worksheets is you can just print them out for your team. If you're like working with a club team or a college team, you can print them out. You can also email the PDF, and they can just be a structure for them to do. It can help them identify their self-talk, their response to error, what goes through their mind. So you're actually helping getting into their head, and then helping them identify how they want to respond. So essentially you're creating an error recovery routine, how they want to respond instead, whether it's just a thought stopping, interrupting the technique, interrupting the negative self-talk, or if it's actually like replacing it with some sort of positive affirmation or instructional self-talk. These are the resources that you will be able to see in the session notes.